Hey guys, welcome to my channel, Johnny Donuts 777. Today we are going to be doing something new, more of a podcast format. And me, myself, being a wrestling fan, I decided the first show we can do is going to be on professional wrestling and our favorite wrestling documentaries. With me, I have Caps, host of Five for Talking on RLG Cast. Caps, want to introduce yourself?
My name is Caps. Got another podcast with Campos and Bargo over at RLG Cast. Been doing that for a couple of years now. Used to be on another channel, but yeah, things are going pretty good. We talk about hockey, we talk about movies, and we've had you on for a few episodes, which were pretty fun.
I think I've become a staple there now.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Cool.
But so this is new.
Yeah, right. Just the two of us. We're missing Campo over here. But so before we head out, I just want to say, okay, yourself being a wrestling fan as well, or at least classic wrestling fan, what got you into wrestling, and maybe some of your favorite wrestlers you had growing up?
It was more or less, I think my father was watching wrestling, and it was just casual, just Saturdays watching wrestling, and just got into it from then on. It's just all these crazy characters. It was just so wacky, but I got hooked. And gone through those 80s, early 90s, the Attitude Era.
Yeah, and then that's where most of us probably trailed off, was right after the Attitude Era. Yeah. I myself have a similar story. My grandfather was the wrestling fan in the family, and like yourself, Saturday mornings on CHCH, right? Maple Leaf Wrestling. Mm-hmm. We used to watch that all the time. So yeah, so excellent, man. So let's have you start off. Talk about some of your favorite wrestling documentaries.
Actually, you asked me a question before, and I shame on me, I didn't answer it. You asked me about my favorite wrestlers.
Yes.
Obviously, I think it's the choice of everyone, but Hulk Hogan, I guess. Andre, early Taker, Bret Hart, and then just moving on to the 90s, Razor Ramon. Those crazy vignettes.
Yo, the Razor Ramon vignettes were the best. Where he's like driving in that lowrider Cadillac, thinking he's Scarface,
pushing that guy into the pond, or that little into the water. Is just
the one I remember was the one at the restaurant where he grabs the waiter.
Oh yeah.
With me, I tended to gravitate more towards the bad guys, or the heels, if you want to call them. It's just because they had the best characters, they had the best. So for me, it was always Piper was one of them. He was always one of my favorites. Mr. Perfect. I just love the arrogance of like Mr. Perfect. I think for everybody who lives in Canada, Bret Hart always has to be one of the top. But then, like you said, same thing with Razor Ramon, Diesel, early Shawn Michaels, when he was just like right when he left the Rockers, when he after he left the Rockers, when he was like that jerk heel, that Shawn Michaels was probably top Shawn Michaels for me.
Yep.
Yeah, cool, man. All right, so let's get started on the topic at hand. Let's talk about some of your favorite documentaries.
Wrestling in Shadows would probably be at the top of my list.
Same here.
Like, what a thing for the director, eh? Like, you're following a wrestler around, you're just probably telling a simple story, and all of a sudden, at the end of the documentary, this crazy story happens where the promoter screws over the wrestler, and the wrestler punches out the promoter, and this whole like crazy scheme happens. And
that's one of my favorite scenes of the whole documentary, is after Hart knocks out McMahon, you just see McMahon like wobbling through the hallway. He can't even walk straight because like Hart knocked him silly. But you're right though, like that told such a great story because it led up to the departure of Bret Hart from the WWE, somebody who thought like he was going to be with the company forever, right? And Vince like gave him this BS excuse about not being able to pay him and all that, even though the company just went like public or something. And I like what it did was it started at the end about him leaving the company, and then it went back a year and just told you everything on how it got there. Like in one of those scenes, probably one of Bret Hart's greatest matches was that SummerSlam match he had. Was it no Survivor Series match? No, was it Survivor or SummerSlam? It was a SummerSlam match he had against The Undertaker, where Shawn Michaels was the referee, right?
Mhm.
It was a and yeah, that was probably one of Bret Hart's greatest matches. That was the last time he won the WWF Championship too. So that was his 5th reign, and it's just like you see everybody like after that happened, just the fact that they all lied to him and how heartbroken his wife was. Like I think that led to their divorce a couple years later too.
Yep. I mean, after that SummerSlam match, you could see things starting to brew up, and he's having trust issues with some of the other wrestlers.
Some of the younger
obviously
guys,
Shawn.
yeah,
Yep.
Triple H.
Yep.
They had their clique, right? So.
Yep. And even after the DVD came out, like people are still talking about it and talking about what happened and who was involved. It seems to be a popular topic. Yeah. So who do you like after watching that? Like who do you think that was involved in that whole crazy scheme?
Clearly Vince was involved 100%. He had the final say. Earl Hebner was involved for sure, because the referee, he even said to Bret, no, I'm going to call it straight down the middle. There's going to be no shenanigans. And as soon as Michaels put him in the sharpshooter, he rang the bell, right? Like he knew that's what Vince wanted. So Hebner was involved. I'm sure Triple H had something to do with it as well. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I think it was those 3 those 3 or 4 that really had Shawn Michaels really had that arrogance about him in that time, and it's like that arrogance played over. He was having like substance abuse issues, I think, at the time. He was like on painkillers for his back. Like I think not even a year after that, he'd leave the company for a while after that match with Steve Austin at WrestleMania for the championship, because his back was destroyed. So at least those 4 I know for sure were involved.
Yeah, I don't know. I question that back injury. I don't know. He has a tendency to just
exaggerate the truth a bit.
Exaggerate the truth of it. Like I remember watching that WrestleMania match when he had a bad back.
The one against Steve Austin, right? Yeah. That's the Mike Tyson referee one.
Yep, and it's like, okay, he's wrestling with a bad back, but he does a kick. What's it called?
Kip up. Yeah, kip up. Yeah. So if you have a bad, that's also the painkillers probably kicking in by that point, right? He probably was injected with so much stuff that
I don't know.
But that's definitely like I said, living in Canada, Bret Hart is probably he's an icon in this country. I don't think his career was ever quite the same after that. That was like the peak for him. After that Survivor Series, after the Montreal Screwjob, everything went downhill for him, I think.
Well, WCW screwed up anyway, because you got the hottest wrestler coming in and you don't even know what to do with him.
Yeah, like they brought him in not even a month later, and he's the special referee against the Sting and Hogan match. That didn't work. And there was the whole fast count. Sting wins the belt, and then like a month later, Hogan wins it back. That was another thing. Like with off topic here, WCW, their issue was like that belt changed hands so many times, and it was like a hot potato that there was no inconsistency in the company. That I think that led to their downfall and poor booking.
Yep, a lot of politics behind the scenes, I would assume. But yeah, like you're bringing in the hottest wrestler, and the first thing you make him do is referee a match. I don't know, man. Like I would make him go against the top stars of your company right away. Like
he should have come in and beaten Goldberg or something like that, because Goldberg had the streak at the time, right?
I don't think Goldberg was started yet. I could be wrong.
Okay, I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, even something like that would have been great. Or at the end of the Sting and Hogan match, even if Sting didn't win the belt, have Hart come in and say, Hogan, you ripped me off at because there was that whole issue with WrestleMania 9 where Hart lost to Yokozuna, and then Hogan all of a sudden is the champ, right? Because Hart wouldn't drop the belt to Hogan.
Yeah, I remember that.
Could have told that story, right?
I remember that because they had an interview with Bret Hart, and he was like, yeah, we did a promotional picture of me and Hulk Hogan with a tug-of-war with the belt, and Hogan doesn't remember this, and Bret Hart, that actually happened. And I think one of the agents there or something like that, or no, Bruce Pritchard,
he was one of the booking agents. Yeah,
he's like, that actually happened. So it's just it's with Hogan, it's like he's he's up and down, in and out.
Yeah.
He's you know.
He's an icon. Never was the greatest talent, but he had that charisma, right? That thing that some people lack that you can't really teach, right? So Hogan had that charisma. He had that appeal to the masses. He had like that, especially growing up in the 80s, it was all about Hogan, right? Everybody, like, he had the cartoon show. He had like remember the LJN rubber figures? Like, everything was Hulk Hogan. He had like the workout set. Do you remember the workout set? Like the Hogan wristbands with the weights.
I'm not surprised, but yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah, so it was all about him, and he had, like I said, he had like never the greatest. Like, I would say Bret Hart is the greatest technical wrestler in the last maybe 30 years, but Hogan had that charm that nobody else could match.
Yep, and that's going to take you a long way. I mean, because he had that sort of second wave, I guess would be the appropriate term, when he faced Rock at
right here in Toronto.
18, yeah,
WrestleMania 18
in Toronto.
Yeah.
And when you ask me one of my favorite matches, that was probably one of my favorite matches. I mean, I have a few, but that's got to be one of the few, because they're just playing with the crowd. The crowd makes it.
But the thing is, like, too, Hogan was supposed to be the bad guy and Rock was the good guy, and we booed Rock out of the building in that show.
So like, you were there?
I was there. I was there. That's why I said we. But yeah, and it's like Hogan couldn't be the villain anymore. He made such a huge babyface turn that like he had to go back to the red and yellow after that. They couldn't do the NWO anymore.
Yep, I guess the WWE fans missed him because he just come in like a few months prior.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about probably greatest matches, it's that Bret Hart Steve Austin match that they had at WrestleMania 13, where they turned Hart heel and Austin babyface in the same night, and that was probably one of the greatest double turns in the history of the company, I think, too. Yep. And probably one of Hart's best matches.
Yep, that's just good storytelling on both of those guys, actually.
Because, you know, the trust and respect that they had for each other in the ring, too, right? Like, it goes a long way. Like, Austin, with all the Harts, really, with Owen, with Bulldog, he always had fantastic matches with those guys.
I mean, just before that match, you could see Austin's character. He was getting popular. And then I think right after that match, zoom, he just like
skyrocketed,
just took off.
He had that. He had those series of matches with Owen Hart for the Intercontinental belt, and then like right after that, he's going after The Rock and Triple H. He's at the top of the card right after that. So.
Yeah, you mentioned Owen Hart. I mean, he had that match with Owen Hart at SummerSlam, and like,
the one he broke his neck.
And he broke his neck. It's like, okay, so he's the kind of guy that was struggling for like so many years, and finally he gets the big time, and his character's taking off, and all of a sudden, boom, he just gets injured, and it's just like, he's out for like a few months. But you know what? In retrospect, I think that kind of helped him as well.
I think so, because he's getting so hot, you take him away and then you bring him back with that red hot heat, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that did help. They kept him off TV for a while. So that, I think, and I noticed too, when he came back from that injury, his style changed as well too. Like the way he was a little bit more technical, he was not so much of like off the top rope anymore. He was not doing those top rope suplexes anymore. He was more of a mat and ground based wrestling. A lot of stomps, a lot of brawling. Yeah.
Because I don't think he would have been able to do what he was doing before that anymore.
You know, and I think the thing about Austin too was he went out at the top, and he hasn't come out of retirement since. And I think that was the smartest thing he could have done.
He's one of the few. Everybody comes back.
Yeah, even Shawn Michaels came back a few years ago after he said he was done.
Yep. Rock came back.
Yeah.
After like what?
7-8 years, I think.
7 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Austin's one of the few. Yeah, I mean, Hart did come back, but it was like
he had that match against McMahon. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was not like, I mean, but he does like Austin. Hart comes back now in a more of a mentor role, I guess. Like he's always showing up at like those Legends events and stuff like that. So. But yeah, I mean, what could have been, right, with Bret Hart? Bret Hart is a real tragedy in this situation here.
Sucks what happened to him.
You know, when WCW was bought out by the WWF at the time, what could have been with his comeback if he didn't have that career-ending injury. Like, think about it. We could have had Hart versus Rock, Hart versus Jericho. Like, think about the matches you could have had back then.
Yep, and because of that career-ending injury, I don't think if that career-ending injury didn't happen, I don't think the stroke would have happened.
No, I think those two led directly into the other.
Yep.
I mean, he
so
recovered really well, though.
Yeah, and then what was it? A couple of years ago, he had cancer. I can't remember what it was.
I think it was non-Hodgkin's
prostate.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Damn, that guy's gone through some crazy stuff.
Yeah, but long live Bret Hart. He's definitely, if you had to pick like a Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, Bret Hart's definitely on that one. Yeah,
he's on it.
100%. He's totally on there.
Yep.
One of the ones I picked that kind of came out around the same time was the wrestling Beyond the Mat. Was one of the ones I picked because back then I was really into the whole ECW was starting out, and I was growing up in the 80s. I was a huge fan of Terry Funk, so it followed Terry Funk's story a little bit. I always was a fan of Jake the Snake Roberts. I have photos with me and Jake over the course of many, many years. So every few years, I always run into Jake Roberts somehow. I don't know how, but I always do. Mm-hmm. And he was always one of my favorite because Jake Roberts was the type of guy. He wasn't one of those guys. Remember in the 80s, it was always like yelling and I'm going to do this and I'm going to. Whereas Jake was like really low and he spoke softly. So it made you pay attention to what he had to say. Right. Mm-hmm. And I found those words more impactful than if you're yelling and screaming. If you're like, you see it, like if you're driving in traffic and a guy's yelling and screaming at you, you're going to blow him off. But if a guy's like talking slowly and methodically to you, you pay more attention to it. And I think that's what I loved about Jake. And it was such a heartbreaking tragedy to see him in that state and Beyond the Mat that it absolutely broke my heart to see him like that. That was one of the main takeaways for me from that one. You've watched it, right?
I've watched it, and those particular scenes with Jake and his daughter are tough to watch. Yeah,
they were
really tough to watch.
But even with his dad, all he wanted was his dad's love and affection, and his dad was just like a jerk.
Yeah, and I think I know we want to talk about it in another episode, but there will be an upcoming documentary on Jake and his dad.
Yeah,
on the new
Dark
season.
Side. Yeah, on the new season of Dark Side of the Ring, which we'll get into on another episode of the show.
And supposedly it's supposed to be really dark.
Yeah, really it's dark. All those have been really dark. Like they've been really good. That's why I want to save it for another episode, is because they're really, really good. So,
but you were talking about Beyond the Mat, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
The storyline with Mick Foley.
Yes.
That beating that he took at the Royal Rumble with those chair shots.
Oh, those chair shots. And you see his wife and his kids just like crying at the side. Yeah, that was gut-wrenching as well. Like it was Mick Foley would do, like he puts his life on the line just to entertain people. That guy. He's something else. And it wasn't like he was a bad wrestler either. He had some pretty good technical ability too. It's not like he was so I don't understand what made him go that route where it's just like brutality based.
Yeah, I think he credited it to some match with Jimmy Fly Snuka where he leaped off the top of a cage to do a splash, and he was just such in awe with how the crowd reacted that he wanted to be that guy. And I think it was just pretty much it. Like it's the reaction that he craves from the crowd, to
the adrenaline, all
this stuff, these crazy things that he did. And then I don't remember, but was the match with the Undertaker, was that documented or was that talked about in that documentary?
That was touched on briefly, like the fact that this guy puts his body on, like he said, he goes, everybody talks about him being thrown off the top of the cage, but nobody talks about him taking that choke slam through the ring and onto the through the cage and onto the mat. He says that actually hurt more than falling off the top of the cage.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but I heard somewhere that chokeslam through the cage was not planned.
No, because it was not structurally sound. So the little I guess those plastic zip cords, they came undone and just went right through. Like there's that graphic image of him, like he's just laughing at the camera and his tooth is coming out of his nose. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think it also mirrors the fact, also touched in that documentary is the story of Terry Funk, a guy who just won't give up. Like he's well past his prime, but you saw like in that first ever pay-per-view that they put on for ECW with Paul Heyman, like you see Terry Funk all bloodied and battered. And it's like, this guy's like 50 something at the time. He's like 54 or something like, and he's still taking a beating like that. And like you see his wife and she goes, yeah, I want him to stop, but I know he'll never stop. He says he's retired, but he'll never retire. Like, and it's true. Like he never did. Like he's still like, if they'll pay him, he'll go.
Yep. And I remember Paul Heyman talking about that and being very appreciative of Terry Funk doing that for that company because it was still starting up.
Yeah, they were just starting up at the time, and you like it's so funny to see a young Tommy Dreamer there, and like Sandman and young Dudleys and all that. Like it was something else. Like and then I look back at those documentaries. I'm thinking, how many people in those documentaries have all sadly passed away now?
Oh yeah, that's true.
Due to other circumstances, like there was both guys from Legion of Doom are now passed away. Vader has passed away not that long ago too. So it's like it brings back that nostalgia factor, like Mr. Perfect. Like it brings, every time I watch it, I feel bad, but I also am glad for the memories that I still have of that era. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you mentioned a little bit of ECW, and that was pretty much that was another pick of mine, and that's the rise and fall of ECW.
Yeah, good transition.
Yeah, and those guys were hardcore. Hardcore. And it was I was a huge fan. Came on a little later.
Yeah,
but Taz and RVD.
Oh my God, yeah.
Huge fans of those guys.
Those matches, or RVD and Sabu.
Yeah.
Those are some good feuds right there. You had Dreamer and Sandman, or Dreamer and Raven, or some, and then all those guys ended up going on to like either WCW or WWE or F at the time, and like they've all went on to have outstanding careers. Taz's career was cut a little short too after he joined WWF as well at the time because of the concussions and the head traumas. But he's another guy who's still around. Still around. He's managing now in AEW.
Yep,
and he has his own faction.
He had a bit of a stint with commentating, and then he moved on to managing. Yeah.
He works well in that manager role.
He does. He does, because he can do a proper promo.
Yeah,
he could do a proper promo, which is
a lost art nowadays. It's either a lost art
or scripted.
That's the thing too. Like, so it's scripted. So like when they're actually told to improvise, they don't. A lot of the younger generation, they don't know what to say. Like back then, it's like, this is what I'm going to say. Like, take someone like the Ultimate Warrior. His promos were so incoherent. Like you didn't know what he was talking about, but you paid attention just because they were so out there. Or someone like probably my favorite wrestler of all time, which is Randy Savage. His promos were like absolutely bonkers. I just remember that one with the cream of the crop one where he has those little milk and he's like throwing them at Mean Gene, and he's always
pulling one out.
Right. But if you listen to that promo, it makes sense. He's talking about cream, and cream always rises, and he goes, I'm the cream of the crop. So like, yeah, it was silly with those little milk creamers, but that promo made sense. And that's all unscripted, whether it's him or whether it was all that cocaine he was on. But
I really don't think the wrestlers of today even have a chance to try to be unscripted and just improvise. Unless you go to AEW, but
right. I think Triple H also allows some of that in. They allow some of their personality to come through in NXT. But I find it's AEW that lets them do what they want, because you have like Chris Jericho there, who probably one of the greatest promos of all time. And the way the guy's able to adapt over a 35 year career, like he's been able to change his character and stay relevant throughout the whole time. Like I've never seen Jericho. Like it's rare that Jericho has a bad match. It's rare that Jericho has a bad promo. He's so passionate about the business that it shines through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he's another one that started in ECW.
Yes, it's true.
Well, not started, but like it was a jumping off point for him in North America between the ECW and Mexico with Eddie and Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio. Like some of those Jericho Mysterio matches in WCW were fantastic.
Yep. Who else was with them? So Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero,
Juventud, I think. Juventud Guerrero. Yeah.
Chris, are we allowed to say that name?
Chris Benoit, I guess so. He was part of it. Like, I mean, what he did, we don't condone, but like he was a talent. Like, you know, WWF scrubbed him, or WWE scrubbed him from the records, but what he contributed to the sport means something. I think, at least.
Yep. And I think his biggest he was just a huge fan of Dynamite Kid.
Yeah.
Dynamite Kid was revolutionary, like what he did. Like he was just unbelievable talent.
He even took the diving headbutt off the top rope, right? So, and
couldn't do a proper promo, but
no, not to. But that's why he was always positioned with someone else. That's why it was always Benoit and Malenko, or Benoit and Guerrero. You know what I mean? It was always someone who can speak with him, so he didn't have to speak. But Benoit was also the type of guy his actions spoke volumes. Right? He didn't have to speak.
I think with Benoit, like he started to learn how to do a proper promo much later on. He was able to, speak well afterwards.
I honestly think that was Eddie Guerrero's influence on that. Like you could tell, like there was Guerrero influence in there, because Guerrero was always a great promo.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
A couple other documentaries.
Yeah, go for it.
Andre the Giant, the one back in the day on AEW. No, AEW. A&E.
A&E, yeah. The biography or whatever it was, right?
Yeah, it's so sad at the end, but it kind of like I wasn't too big of an Andre fan, like in the beginning, but then after seeing that documentary and the HBO one that came out a couple of years ago, it's like, wow, this guy could like wrestle. Like I only knew the guy like in the singlet, the black singlet.
Because that was close to the end of his career when we started watching in the 80s, right? So,
but then when you watch matches from the 70s and early 80s, like this guy could like
he can
fly.
Go for a big man. He had some agility. He was something else. Like to watch those old Andre matches. Same thing with you. Like I just knew that Andre, the singlet, big menacing, like the WrestleMania 3 Andre, right? And after watching that A&E documentary, I went back and I searched some of his old matches. Same thing. It's like, and then just to hear some of the people talk about the stories he had, like the amount of alcohol the man was able to drink, like it was just to hear those stories was like entertainment alone, right? To be in a car with Andre the Giant. Can you imagine? Like, I need to stop off for like 17 beers.
I mean, I saw a story, heard about a story with Jake the Snake Roberts where he picked up Andre the Giant at the airport and then drove off to another city. And then Andre wanted to pick up some beer. And then it's like he asked for 2 cases of beer. And by the time they reached the next city, he drank everything.
He drank them all, yeah.
And Jake's like, what the hell?
Yeah, like it's insane.
And it's like, he's like, I don't recall pulling over for you to take a piss or anything. You know what I mean? And it's like, and you went through 2 cases of beer? Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So I remember hearing about that story somewhere. But, going back to the whole wrestling thing, it's like, I don't know if you ever noticed, but he can definitely work a crowd.
Yes.
And for me, this is just my opinion, I honestly think that's where Hulk Hogan learned how to work a crowd from.
Was from Andre.
Yeah.
I think he took some from Andre, a little bit. I think there's definitely some Jesse Ventura influence there, and some superstar Billy Graham. I think you're right. That's where Hogan really developed. That's how Hogan really developed that character.
Yep. Yeah.
because in before he joined WWF at the time, it was in the AWA, and he was very bland in the AWA. He was just this big menacing guy. They called him the Incredible Hulk Hogan, right?
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, absolutely. And touching on your Jake the Snake, another documentary that I picked is The Resurrection of Jake the Snake Roberts, the one that came out a few years ago. Have you had a chance to watch that one?
I've seen certain parts of it.
Yeah.
I've seen him have his setbacks with DDP.
Yeah.
But I need to definitely sit down and watch that thing.
It's a fantastic story. It's the exact mirror opposite of the Beyond the Mat one. This is his redemption, like I said, and he turns his life around. He commits because DDP holds him accountable in that situation. They even touch on Scott Hall a little bit in that documentary, where Scott Hall basically was going down a similar path of Jake the Snake Roberts, right? But Hall had that support from the beginning where Roberts didn't. And it just to see where he was in 98 when that came out, and 2018 when this 20 years later, it's night and day for Jake Roberts. Like, he's turned his life around. He's off the junk. Like, he's not drinking anymore. He doesn't smoke anymore. He's living a better life, and he's better for it. And like, it shows, like, because he's another one that's managing now in AEW, and you could see the passion has come back for him, and it's all documented in that the Resurrection of Jake the Snake Roberts. It literally is Jake's redemption story and his journey back at the time to the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yeah. You know what the most interesting part of that is that Jake the Snake probably had the worst life or path amongst all those wrestlers that have passed on.
Yeah.
And he's still here.
Yeah.
That is the craziest thing.
Yeah. That he was able to survive all that. Like, it's crazy. Like, and good for him. Like, I mean, if anybody's earned it, it's him. But yeah, Scott Hall is another one. He was going down a dangerous path as well. Yep.
And I think those guys still have some rough patches here and there. I think they still have their setbacks every once in a while, but I think they realize that this is going to be pretty much a lifelong battle for them, and to keep moving on and to keep going. But
they don't want to become just another statistic, right? We've lost so many way beyond, like, way too early. Like, we lost Savage too early. We lost Mr. Perfect. We lost Piper early. Like, it's sad, and they didn't want to become just another statistic to that, right?
Yeah, I remember the Savage story where he reunited with someone that he went to school with in high school, and then they got married.
Yeah,
and he was happy.
It was the happiest he's ever been, and then he dies.
And then he just dies.
Yeah,
it's like
it's such a tragic. Like, some of these stories outside of the ring are more interesting than some of the ones they tell inside of the ring sometimes. Like, the tragedy to some of these, like, and it's true, like, all the hits to the head and all, like, whatever you want to call it, like, it really takes its toll on them. And there's a wrestler about 15 years ago. His name was Christopher Nowinski. Now he started this foundation about head trauma and head injury and all that. And I think since that started, they've been a little bit more cognizant about how they hit and how they take hits and how they bump now. Like, if you notice, you don't have any more unprotected headshots with a chair anymore. Like, that's something that could lead to that trauma.
And those are the same guys that examined Benoit's brain.
Yes, they are. It was that same foundation that did that. And they found that it was like the combination of, like, drugs and, like, just head trauma. It really messes with you. Like, it's not just that. They also notice it in football players who take very similar hits, whether to the head. That's why now in football, it's they don't allow helmet to helmet contact anymore, do they?
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, but I think that's a rule that they have now, is in the NFL, they don't allow helmet to helmet, just because it just, the compression of your spine and your head, it's not good for you. Like, and it's been proven. So, another statistic. Anything else you wanted to touch on?
No, like just touching what you were saying. I remember an interview with Scott Hall. Scott Hall was like, "Why would you take a straight chair shot to the head? You know, if you ever notice my chair shots to the head, like just before the chair comes down, I just put my hand up like right here so that
The hand takes
the
the
hand
impact.
takes the
Yeah.
impact. But you know, it's I guess it's experience. Like and those guys in ECW, just I think they're just nuts. They want to. I think it's just for the crowd, for the reaction.
Yeah.
They'll like you ever notice like when they take a chair shot to the head, they just brace themselves. But okay, it's
because
coming.
they know it's coming. Yeah.
It's like,
One of the guys who was notorious for that was Tommy Dreamer.
mm-hmm.
Like he was notorious for taking those chair shots to the head. There was that feud. The one that made him was the one against Raven. And there was one where I think Raven just like pile drive them onto the chair, like head first. Like it was insane. Like literally ECW, I think it gained that notoriety about being like literally extreme wrestling, but towards their end too, I think that was they took it too far at that point when it was at the end. And then the fact that Heyman didn't pay anybody.
Oh yeah, yep. Rise and fall of ECW. That's all
Yeah.
documented on there.
That's all. Yeah. I tended to, for this one, I tended to go with ones that weren't all WWE based, because sometimes WWE based can be a little biased towards their own legends and their own company. So I kind of like the ones that tell the story. That's why I like the Dark Side of the Ring ones so much. It's because they're unbiased.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which we'll talk about.
Yeah, that's something we'll get into. But if you have no more talking points, thanks for joining me on this premiere episode over here. So check us out on RLG Cast. I'll have the link down in the bio. Caps and I and Campo, we do a few reviews. We do some top fives. And you can catch Caps over here on 5 for Talking on RLG Cast. I'll leave the link to his video in this, and it'll be on one of the tabs on the bottom as well. Caps, thanks for joining me.
All right, man. Thanks for having me, man.